The Witcher 3 is getting an expansion pack 12 years after its release. At the time of scripting this video, this is breaking news, and even after some time it is hard to believe. The Witcher is neither a multiplayer game or a game as a service. I understand how games like GTA 5, Hearts of Iron 4, Genshin Impact or Counter-Strike would to this day receive updates, but it is extremely unusual for a quote-unquote standard role-playing game. Not that I consider The Witcher 3 to be just a standard game, mind you, it is extraordinary and it has written video game history. What I found to be surprising is that a game that came out in 2015, with 2 expansions in 2016, suddenly comes back 11 years later with a third big downloadable content. To put it into perspective, the original game came out for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. This new expansion coming out next year could potentially be released on a new PlayStation 6 and a new Xbox Helix. The first Switch did not even exist in 2015. The Wii U was Nintendo's console at the time. That's just like ages ago. Speaking of the Wii U, there's a singular example of a game that has a similar tale, Mario Kart 8. That game also came out, got some DLCs 1 year later, no new content for 8 years, and to everyone's surprise a new expansion, named the Booster Course Pack. But how did that end up happening, and is that a good omen for our favorite Witcher? Not quite really, but first things first, roll the intro. Mario Kart 8 is probably the Mario Kart game I've played the most. When it came out back in May 2014, I bought it day one, and I enjoyed it ever since. I adored it so much that when the first DLC came out 1 year later, I may or may not have taken a sick day from high school just to play it as soon as possible. Sorry, but not sorry. Speaking of the DLC, this was the first time ever a Mario Kart game got additional content post-launch. Nintendo games in general introduced the concept of DLC fairly late, so it all felt quite experimental but also exciting. For Mario Kart 8 specifically, Nintendo nailed it. They increased the number of courses from 32 to 48, as well as some new characters and vehicles, for surprisingly quite affordable price, only 12 euros. The 2 waves had some banger tracks, including Yoshi's Circuit, Baby Park, Hyro's Circuit, Dragon Driftway, Cheeseland, the 2 F-Zero tracks and more. These circuits are so well made that MK without them feels empty, despite 32 being the regular number of tracks. Not to mention free updates that added things like the Amiibo support, the Mercedes and the 200cc mode. Truly a well-made DLC package from Nintendo. After these lovely additions, the game remained as it was. Sure, it got the port for the Switch named Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in 2017 that did add, or rather fix, the battle mode, but the game remained fairly unmodified ever since. Not that it needed much modifications since it is the 5th best-selling video game of all times, with approximately 80 million units sold, and it is still available in stores today, 12 years later. With a sequel probably in development, not yet announced, fans like myself believe it was over for Mario Kart 8. That is, until we saw the Nintendo Direct. The 9th of February 2022, 7 years after the last DLC came out for our favorite karting game, we got an announcement, one huge announcement. The game was not only getting a third wave of tracks, but a 4th, and a 5th, and a 6th, and a 7th, and an 8th wave in the span of 2 years. This meant that the now very popular, but kind of old game was doubling the number of tracks it got inside the cartridge, from an already impressive 48 to 96. Yes, 96, close to 100. Mario Kart Double Dash has 16 tracks to put into perspective. This was quite a bold move from Nintendo, one that was priced also fairly, at 25 euros. As my favorite Chancellor would say, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. This was a deal too good to be true. If anything, this was a deal too good to be true. The Switch 2 era of Nintendo is known for the company's high prices, but it is not like in 2022 the company was giving away free games either. There was something odd about this absurd, seemingly ideal situation. Why is, at the time, an 8-year-old game suddenly receiving a new wave of DLCs out of the blue? Also, Mario Kart did not have this Splatoon model of receiving content regularly throughout the years. Sure, it is also a multiplayer game, but not like Splatoon. Your average player plays it locally in split screen. Something did not seem right. Was the new Mario Kart cancelled? In hindsight, we learned that Mario Kart World was indeed cancelled, or rather, it was in development for the first Switch around that time, but due to technical limitations, the project was moved to the Switch 2. This meant that the large gap of Mario Kart content, one of Nintendo's biggest selling franchises, was unforeseen, resulting in the Booster Course Pack. What we now know as the Plan B was not perceived as such then. People like myself were suspicious, but nevertheless excited to receive new content for the everlasting game that was Mario Kart 8. I believe the sole title I bought twice for different consoles. But 25 euros for 48 tracks? That was too generous for the Nintendo we know. Shortly after the trailer, when the excitement faded away, it was clear these new tracks felt, off. Sure, some were based on the mobile game Mario Kart Tour that had their own gimmicks and art style, but the rest of the tracks shown in the trailer felt uncanny. This was not just a feeling, but a reality that soon materialized. Mario Kart 8 is of course not a highly realistic game, but it is still very graphically impressive. Unadjusted realism with that Super Mario touch that makes tracks believable and outstanding. Look at these base game tracks. This game came out in 2014, and yet they still look solid. Now look at the DLC tracks that were announced. There is clearly something off. We're all hoping that the trailer was not up to date with development, but Copium only brought us so far, and what they showed was what we got, as you can see by the gameplay in the background. These new tracks, especially in the first 2 waves of the new DLC, looked awful with capital A. 3D Toad Circuit was taken by everybody as the main example for this poor quality, and for good reason. This grass looks like Play-Doh. The Wikipedia article for the Booster Course Pack instead uses the Shroom Ridge as a clear example of the downgrade these new tracks were when compared to the base game. It is evident, clear as day, that this DLC was rushed in order to fill that 3-year gap before the release of Mario Kart World, a game that sure, it is not the perfect sequel, but at least got a proper graphical treatment. Mind you, of course graphics are not everything, but they do clearly showcase how rushed of a job this was. Not that the tracks themselves fare any better. Since most of these tracks are from Tour, and thus from the GBA game Mario Kart Super Circuit, we observe this. Tracks that not only have a flat layout, but that for some reason were simplified to the bone. The layout of the beloved Sky Garden went from this to this, fate shared with many other tracks on the list. Furthermore, some fanfare tracks had some features removed for no apparent reason. Sunset Wilds has no sunsets, Sky High Sunday is all set in anti-gravity for no reason, and do not get me started on the moving cars of Wii Coconut Mall. The tour tracks, the few circuits that can be considered new, were also not that welcome additions. The mechanic of having laps changing during the race is conceptually interesting. That Sonic racing game for the Wii U did it few years before, but in my and the majority's opinion, made the game unnecessarily complex. When playing split screen, it is hard to see those guiding arrows, and all the traps that usually accumulate during a race, think of all the banana peels and shells, do become obsolete. Exploring real-life cities is neat, but I can guarantee you that 10 out of 10 players would have prepared to explore tracks based on other Nintendo franchises that did not appear before, such as Star Fox, Pikmin, Kirby, and hey, why not a third F-Zero track? Now, I do want to turn up the optimism for one bit, and do concede that some tracks, especially in latter waves, were actually well received, both graphically and gameplay-wise. I would lie if I did not say that I did not welcome back 3DS Rainbow Road, GameCube's Daisy Circuit, and even Rosalina's Ice World, all tracks that are in general good enough to race in, with good remake music too. Surely, it was overall a net positive, the increase of the track's catalog. The problem is that it is clear Nintendo pushed for quantity and not quality, rushing a DLC to a game that did not receive any for over 7 years. If anything, the way made it even worse. Not only did it exclude nearly 9 million people who did have the game on the Wii U, but it overhyped a game that needed a sequel rather than new content. Now, even if I did start this video by addressing The Witcher 3 upcoming expansion, Song of the Past, a DLC that itself is coming 11 years after the last update the game had, there are distinctions between the two similar stories to be made. To start with, while this new content is not coming to the PS4 and Xbox One, where the game originally came out, The Witcher 3 can be freely updated to the new current-gen versions, something 9 million Mario Kart players on the Wii U, like myself, did not have the option to, despite the Switch version not even being that much different when it comes to performance. Also, the gap between this third DLC of The Witcher 3 and the upcoming Witcher 4 is already announced to be fairly short, perhaps coming out the same year. This entails that such content is not bridging a large 3-year gap due to technical problems, at least as far as we are aware, but rather a much shorter waiting time. Having said that, I did want to share the tale of Mario Kart 8 Booster Course Pack as a bit of a warning on how a single-player game receiving new content out of the blue could end up poorly. In the case of The Witcher 3 specifically, developers even have to deal with an obsolete game engine, aged voice actors in 7 different languages, and the empirical fact that it is extremely unlikely that a great number of people were casually playing The Witcher 3 the weekend before the announcement. Picking up a role-playing game after so much time is a feat by itself. I would argue that Mario Kart 8 had actually a better starting point than The Witcher, and yet, as we learned today, the Booster Course Pack did not end up being the success story it was promised. There was the potential for it to be outstanding, but it ended up being alright, with a bad start and a half-decent recovery. Do I wish the same to happen to Girls' Last Dance? Of course not, but take this video as a warning not to repeat the same mistakes made by our favorite Italian plumber. All games can get a second life even after a decade, but be careful what you wish for. Mario Kart 8 Booster Course Pack was supposed to be basically a new entry in the Mario Kart franchise by the mere 48 tracks it promised. The higher the hype, the further the fall. This reasonably priced DLC was definitely underwhelming, one so disappointing that I did not take sick days from university to play the new ways on day one. The Witcher 3's Song of the Past has all the conditions and all the warnings of Mario's Tale. I truly hope the developers treat this one carefully. In parallel, I do wonder if Mario Kart World will get any DLC soon. At the time of recording, no announcements were made, but man if I have a bad tendency to release these videos late. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many Mario Kart 8 times for watching today's video. I'm so happy that I got to make my mandatory Mario Kart video for the year. It would be truly odd for me not to make one. What did you think about the booster course pack, and is The Witcher 3 going to repeat the same mistakes? I wish you all a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci!